for the likes of you two. Boring? Well, we won't be blowing things up. Taking or engaging in fire, crash landing expectedly or unexpectedly. Those were the days.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for Season 3, or the final season of Star Trek Picard. Obviously, this is the final season of Picard. It's the one that most Star Trek fans have been most anticipating, and the main reason for that is the return of the Next Generation crew back in the fold, so to speak. Now, I did cover the first 4 episodes of Star Trek Picard a number of weeks ago, and the first 4 episodes absolutely impressed me. And for those of you who don't know, this time round, Picard essentially, at the beginning of the show, he gets like an SOS from Dr. Crusher. And he essentially recruits Riker to head off to try and help Dr. Crusher. He then discovers that he's got a long-lost son. He must have had an affair with Dr. Crusher many years ago. He's got a long-lost son. The changelings are back. They are then framed and become like criminals of the Federation. They're hunted down by the Federation, but in actual fact there's a plot by the changelings to take over from within the Federation, and it's all pointing to one event, and it's the Frontier Day. It's the day where where Starfleet and the Federation kind of celebrate themselves, and it's also the day where the changelings and an unknown threat at that point is prepared to strike. Right, what are my thoughts on Star Trek Picard, the final season? Well, I'll give you a little bit of my thoughts on Star Trek Picard overall. The first season of Picard, I thought, was lukewarm. I thought there were moments in that series where I thought that there was an awful lot of promise here and there, but overall, you couldn't help but feel a little bit disappointed by that one. Season 2, I couldn't finish. I think I got maybe 2nd or 3rd episode, and I couldn't carry on. It was like Bambi almost. You know, Star Trek was Bambi being put down by these imbeciles that didn't really know what they were doing with the show. So I have to be honest, my expectations for Season 3 were rock bottom at that point, regardless of whether the crew were coming back, because my thoughts were, well, if they've done this to Picard in the first 2 seasons, you know, I didn't recognise him as Picard anymore. What are they going to do with the rest of the crew? I was a little bit concerned. But thankfully, those worries and concerns have well and truly been put to bed, because Star Trek Picard Season 3 is an absolute return to form. It's a continuation of the Next Generation. Or you could argue more of a continuation of the movies, maybe. It feels a bit more big budget and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't feel, even though there are many, many nods to the original Next Generation show in this, and one in particular near the end that just will have you jumping out. If you're a Star Trek fan, it'll have you jumping out of your chair, kind of giving big whoops sort of thing. It was so exciting to see what they did at the end of this show by bringing back some of the arguably one of the most iconic ships of all time. I mean, there's a scene in this show where they kind of go meet up with Geordi, and he's kind of in charge of looking after, like, it's almost like a space museum of the most iconic ships the Federation has ever known, including the original Enterprise and the Bird of Prey from Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, and so on and so forth. And that itself was a brilliant, brilliant moment. But yeah, it really does deliver everything you would want for, as a Star Trek fan, I think, Picard Season 3. It's almost, you don't really know where to start, because I'm not going to lie, a few times watching it, I got a little bit emotional. Because it was just so wonderful to have all these characters back that you love so much, and you didn't realise you missed as much as you did. They've now become like, legacy characters from the original Next Generation show, and to give them the send off that they deserved after the disappointment of Star Trek Nemesis, it was just so respectful, and they absolutely hit the ground running. It's almost like these guys had never stepped away from the characters. Picard was back to being Picard. Everybody was behaving how they should behave. The banter between Riker and Worf's there. The love story between Riker and Troy. Everything. I mean, everything's there, and the return of Data is so great. I mean, if you thought about it, you'd be kind of like, oh, come on. I mean, they've given Data so many deaths and stuff. Surely they can't be bringing him back again. But they do, and it works. It absolutely works. And the introduction of some new characters as well, and the introduction of, Geordie LaForge's daughters into the show worked really well, and one of them was his real-life daughter, apparently. The storyline of the Changelings was excellent, and how that evolves by the end of the show was excellent. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it too much, but needless to say, after the debacle of season 2 with what they did to the Borg, we get a little bit more of the Borg, but back on form in this show, thankfully. I mean, it's exciting. There's loads of cliffhangers here as well. And with Star Trek, The Next Generation, and even the original series sort of thing, we were used to kind of like one-off stories each week sort of thing. That's kind of what you got. Whereas this, it almost feels like one huge movie, because it's got like, one continuous arc running through all the episodes. And it just continues to raise the stakes sort of thing brilliantly. There's conflict between, there's a few moments in it where there's like major conflict between Riker and Picard when they think it's kind of the end of the road sort of thing, and Riker thinks Picard's made a terrible decision. Initially, I was a bit concerned about the inclusion of Raffi, played by Michelle Hurd. I've not really been a big fan of her character in the first 2 seasons. And she was actually okay in this third season. She was not overshadowing any of the Next Generation characters at all, and the addition of Picard's son and Crusher's son, a great addition. You know what I mean? There's this mystery surrounding him. There's something just not right about him, and it keeps that mystery going brilliantly throughout the whole show until the reveal takes place as to what's going on. The Changeling threat was really good, and the head villain for the Changelings was really good and really effective and really over the top, like a brilliant pantomime villain. The effects were out of this world. And the USS Titan, that's much of the show is based on, where much of the crew are based, just fabulous. I think I've fallen in love with that ship. I think it's styled brilliantly. So there's not an awful lot of weaknesses I can give with this show. If you're a Star Trek fan, it's a no-brainer. For me, they've knocked it out of the park with Star Trek Strange New Worlds last year. I can't wait for the second season of that. And if we never see these characters again, thankfully they have gone out on an absolute high, and we as Star Trek fans thank them, and finally the writers pulling their heads out of the arses and giving us the Star Trek that we and these characters deserve. So, yeah. If you've been holding off on Picard Season 3 because you've been worried, don't be worried. I promise you, as a Star Trek fan, you're going to enjoy it, because I certainly did. So thank you very much for watching.